My name is Sahil Bipin Deshpande. I'm a student of architecture from the Rizvi College of Architecture, that is Mumbai University. And currently I'm doing my research fellowship where I'm kind of taking this research forward and I'm getting much into the details of Mumbai. So as you can see, this was my topic, says sanitation, a case study across 8 metropolises towards framing a sustainability oriented urban manifesto. So firstly, I'll introduce the cities that I visited, where I had broadly categorized into 3 different things. So the first city that I visited was Johannesburg in South Africa, and from there I moved to Pretoria, again in South Africa. In terms of South Africa, I was looking forward for the informal settlement of Soweto. From South Africa, I moved to Kenya, where I was in Nairobi, again an informal settlement in Nairobi called as Kibera, Kambimuru in Kibera. Followed by that was the European continent, where I was first in Zurich. From Zurich I went up to Oslo, then I went to Paris, then I went to Tampere, Helsinki to understand the dry toilets, how they work and all. From Helsinki I moved to Belfast and then got back to the Asian continent, where first I was in Shanghai. From Shanghai I moved to Beijing and then back to my country, where I was first in Delhi and Alwar. The thing that you can see in the right is my competition entry. Now talking about my topic, this was in order to understand the scenario of sanitation overall. So it says that what is happening to the urban poor is a story not just of income poverty but many other forms of deprivation. The quote highlights one of the basic but grave concerns of the urban living in the cities of the developing world. For example, for the urban poor, it's not just the income that is an axis of deprivation. There are a lot more axes of deprivation, including sanitation. So one of my own grim and troublesome experience in this regard has been the issue of sanitation, and unfortunately it is a topic that people are often shy to discuss. Also in terms of architects and our practices, we tend to focus more on the broader aspect of forms and space, where we kind of miss out on these smaller aspects of the urban planning level. So also it says that the reluctance to engage in this kind of activities has resulted in 2.5 billion people in all over the world without having proper access to sanitation, and like 1.2 billion who have no sanitation facilities at all. So this is a kind of a large number, which is scary. So in terms of architects, we need to do something with respect to this entire urban planning. So this was my proposal, which I tried to give in order to understand the sanitation at an urban planning level and to see how things can be tweaked and can be put up in different contexts all over the world. So talking about the Indian urbanization, India shares most characteristic features on the ongoing urbanization with other developing countries. The country is in a state of acceleration in the process of urbanization. The unchecked influx of people in the existing and the new urban centers has resulted in 17% of the population of India having no access to sanitation facilities at all, and around 50 to 80% of the wastewater being disposed of without any treatment. Talking in terms of Mumbai, it is like an example of a city magnetizing migrants by its opportunity, but it leaves them helpless to discharge in the urban immediacy. Yet it still depends on the sewer system that was laid like a century back. The system is yet accessible for the slums that house more than half of the entire urban inhabitants. Also, the accessible system proved to be insufficient, compelling 1 out of 20 inhabitants to release themselves in the open. This, along with poor hygiene practices, are a result of the number of deaths and illness amongst children, and is a nuclear cause of the economic failure and the shrunken opportunities to many more. So it shows like even if it's like a smaller aspect of sanitation, how does it affect the entire country's prosperity. What I had done is I had kind of categorized my entire research into 7 different points, where the first point spoke about the policy framework. Talking in terms of policy framework, in order to meet the city's urgent need for sanitation, a lot of policies need to be drafted. Many times it so happens that these policies are drafted without considering the context. So it is of a greater importance to understand the context and then to draft the policy according to the context. So in order to understand this, I kind of came across like 2 important policies that have had a large impact in terms of India, which was the National Urban Sanitation Policy as well as the Slum Sanitation Program. The National Urban Sanitation Policy, it focused more in terms of the rural development as well as in terms of the urban level planning. What happened out here is, without considering the context, it was being applied to a lot of parts, which was kind of not good for the policy to work out at a longer stretch. As in the policy, it couldn't be much sustainable. The second policy, it spoke about the slum sanitation program, which is like, as you know, like the slums are more than 50% of Mumbai's population. So the second policy, it spoke about the slum sanitation program, in which they kind of got more of the community development programs in it, and that's how they were kind of promoting sanitation. So now this was the situation, what was happening in Mumbai. So in order to understand good practices, I came across two different sets. One was talking in terms of the policies in the informal settlements. So I had selected the city of Soweto, and in terms of the formal settlements, I tried to understand the policies that have been drafted by the EU, that is the European Union. So this is Soweto. This is in Johannesburg, Republic in South Africa. So what happens is, in Soweto, it is the southwestern township in which a lot of Africans were being pushed in order to work on the gold mines out there. If you can see, this is the existing scenario, and the entire thing is on a low line. So what happens is, during rains, this entire thing gets flooded, where sanitation is too bad. If you can see, these are the current scenarios, and I kind of got through a lot of interviews to different kind of people, having like all different thoughts about sanitation as such. So it was including a few good interviews, which were like a few good interviews in all the world's different languages. For example, there was one that was like Kosa, the way that you pronounce it, and all these different people had like a same opinion in terms of sanitation out there, which is kind of good. So if you see these toilets are placed here and here, and this was the kind of services that they had, and this shows what exactly was the living condition in Soweto. So what the government out here has done is, it has drafted this policy. It's called as the White Paper on the Basic Household Sanitation, which emphasizes on the provision of basic level of sanitation to the houses with the greatest needs. So people from Soweto, what happened is, people from Soweto, they were categorized into three different groups. That is, one was the lower income group, the second one being the middle income group, and the third one being the higher income group. And they were given houses were allotted on the same categorized. So if you see, this was the house that was given to a lower income group. So people from here will be shifted to here. And what the government is expecting is, the policy should work in such a way that this will get into the prosperity of the city itself. So this was the houses that were provided for the lower income group. Then these are the houses that are provided for the higher income group, and then you see the middle income group. So what was the main aim of the policy was, as you see, the key to this white paper is that the provision of the sanitation services should be demand driven and community based, with a focus on community participation and household choice. So this was in terms of the informal settlement that I could cover out there in Soweto. In terms of the European Union, what basically I was looking for was the kind of norms that the European Union has set up for each city to follow. It's mainly concerned with the collection, the treatment and the discharge of the urban waste, and the treatment and the discharge of the urban waste, where all the cities have tweaked themselves in order to follow these common norms. So the example that I've taken out here is of the city of Belfast, where the city has taken an initiative to understand what exactly are the requirements in terms of the wastewater treatment, and how has the city entirely developed according to that. So this was a part of the wastewater treatment plan. It's more into the technological terms, like how exactly it works. So as you can see, household, industrial, rainwater, roads and cleaning activities, all the waste is taken to the sewer lines, which is further taken to the treatment plants. From here, based on the kind of outputs they want, it is divided into 4 steps. One is the preliminary step. In the preliminary step, what happens is, the preliminary steps in the preliminary treatment, what happens is, the first thing is screening, where large objects are taken out from the sewer and then the entire thing is put forward for a primary treatment. In the primary treatment, it is divided again into two parts, where it is either settled sewage or the sewage sludge. So the entire wastewater gets into these tanks, where if you see, these are the screeners, in which the screeners break down the higher molecules into like lower substances, and the entire sludge is taken out, and depending on each city's rules, it is either put it into incinerators, or either they use it as fertilizers. So, and then as I said, like if in case it is needed, there will be tertiary treatment that will be taken, and then the entire water will be let into the receiving waters. So this was in terms of Belfast that I could visit, was the Northern Ireland wastewater treatment plant, where if you see this first, it talks about the screening part. From here the entire process starts. Like this is the preliminary treatment, then this entire part is the primary treatment, where higher compounds are like broken into like smaller molecules. Followed by this, after that process is the secondary treatment. In this treatment, what exactly happens is it's more or less a biological treatment, in which activated bacteria are being put up, and with the help of this is aeration that is happening, and because of this, the bacteria thrives on the entire on the oxygen, and it kind of break down those bigger molecules into simpler substance more. After this is the kind of water that is let into the receiving waters, and since it was in Belfast, the government doesn't allow to use the byproducts as fertilizers. So what they've done is they have incinerators out here. It was quite a good study for me to understand like how has each government set up its rule. For example, in Belfast, the government had put up it directly into the incinerators. When I was in Oslo, I did come to know that the government out there has allowed people to use the waste products as fertilizers. So I'll explain that once we come to the slide also. So now the second point was to understand design of cities' overall sanitation system. So this mainly was concerned with my different categories. So it was informal settlements and the formal settlements that Mumbai is made up of. So in terms of the informal settlements, I was in this informal settlement of Kamvemuru, that is in Kibera in Nairobi. And in terms of the formal settlement, I was in the city of Oslo, where I kind of tried to study what exactly has the city done in order for the waste management. So if you see, this was a toilet installation done by the Oss University out there in Oslo, where the students had taken an initiative to understand how can the entire wastewater be treated and used on site. What they had done was they had added a few things, such as if you see, this is the UDDTs, that is urine diversion systems, and then you have the vacuum urinals and the accessible basins, as well as the on-site treatment plants. So this was just a part of like how will they treat their own waste, where it was again taken, as I earlier stated, it was again taken to the sewers, where things were taken out during screening, and then the entire process. Now see, out here even you see is the wastewater that was being taken away to the receiving waters. Now, as I earlier mentioned, this was a city in which they use the byproducts as fertilizers, and the entire heat generated during the process was being used to run the wastewater treatment plant out there. So, so this covers a part in which it talks about more of the centralized systems. Also, what the city government has done is, in terms of the solid waste management, it has kind of separated all different solids so that it can be recycled and used. And the next thing talks about how exactly has the city tried, how exactly has the government tried to incorporate in each and every different aspect of waste management. And this talks about this was in terms of the decentralized system that I kind of studied out there, which was in the clustering apartments in Oslo. So all these different parts, they club together and they make one network. That is how the city of Oslo works in. So this was something that I was interested to study when I was in Oslo, in order to understand if I want to tweak up these policies and if I can use them out there in Mumbai. So talking in terms of the informal settlement, as I said, I was in this informal settlement of Kibera. which is in which is in Kenya, which is in Nairobi, sorry. And Kibera, it consists of like 13 villages, and I was in the village of Kambemuru, where the kind of sanitation the sanitation they had was kind of really bad. They had like around 5 different kinds of toilets. If you can see, this was the first toilet that I was being introduced to. So this was like the pit latrines that they have. If you can see the kind of construction out here, what happens is, because of this kind of construction, this has given rise to a number of diseases. Secondly, what happened is there were a lot of crime reports because of this. So what people generally did was they started releasing themselves into polythene bags, and they just threw it out of the house. So now if you see Kambemuru, it is more of this thing. So as an initiative, what the WSUP, that is the Water and Sanitation for Urban Poor, Kenya, what they've done is they have categorized these 3 different kinds of toilets, where the first one is the commercial block, the second one is the first one is the community block, sorry, the second one is the commercial block, and the third one being the biodigester. So the WSUP has kind of, as you saw in terms of the formal settlements, that there was a network that was being laid. So what out here the WSUP has done is it has kind of laid a network which is connected to the condominium sewers, which takes the waste across and then treats it. So these were the community blocks which were connected to a septic tank, and with the help of these Gulpa pumps, it was carried to the condominium sewers. Now if you see the commercial blocks, it was directly connected to the condominium sewers. What was the difference between the community blocks and the commercial blocks was, since this was directly connected into the sewers, into the condominium sewers, what it had was, it had a lot of water facilities. So this helped in order to flush the sewers. So these are the 2 kinds, and then there was the bio centers that the WSUP had set up. This was also in order to do in order to enhance on the community driven program. So what generally happens is, out here on the ground you have like the services that have been provided. On top, on the first floor, it was the main activities, such as like there was a kitchen that was being provided, and on top was the community activities. So when I was there were screening soccer matches out there. So this is the kind of response that the community started giving after the installation of such kind of toilets. And then they also had like their own waste management happening. But what happens is, it is kind of interesting for me to understand what will happen in the long run for these kind of toilets, because it is crucial to understand that these toilets need to sustain themselves if they have to work it the way they want to. So so these were the different kind of toilets that the WSUP has worked out in order to form this network. So the third point, it spoke about the mapping the socio-economic context of the urban fabric of an urban poor neighborhood. So in this, what I've tried to do is I've tried to understand Mumbai, what exactly are the situations in Mumbai. So if you see, like 27.8% of the population is of India stays in the urban areas. In urban areas, like there is in urban areas around 7.87% of the people they lack access to toilets. Then it's about 8.13% who use community toilets, and around 19.49 having as in they use the shared latrines, whereas the rest do kind of toilets that are connected to the sewers. Now talking in terms of the waste management, what happens is it shows that 18.5% they do not have any drainage network. Then 39.8 are connected to open drains, and then you have the sewer system. But it was quite interesting for me to understand that even if there are sewer systems that are being laid, a lot of sewers were directly put into the water bodies, which was like 50 meters deep inside the Arabian Sea, without treating the waste. So what I was kind of understanding was what was the government initiative to help on these broader issues which they need to tackle to. So then talking in terms of the design and the technological consideration of public toilets, I kind of try to understand how have different organizations kind of come up with new issues of sanitation. So in terms of so the first one talks about the Olympic Forest Park in Beijing, where the community has kind of adopted this a self-sustainable system where they kind of provide the toilets as well as they treat the waste and use it themselves. So these are the kind of, so this was like the installation of urine diversion distribution technique at the Olympic Forest Park, and then you have like a lot more categories to how things should be accessible. And yeah, these are the toilets that I could visit, and if you see the entire part, this was based on the wastewater treatment. So the entire waste from these plants were the entire waste from these toilets were taken and was treated on site and used on site. So that was one. Talking about when I was in Helsinki, I came across these the dry toilets of Helsinki. So this was an initiative taken by the Tamk University in not in Helsinki, in Tampere. So this was one of the installation at the Tamk University in Tampere, where if you see, this is a dry toilet, and what happens is generally after the use of toilet, they kind of put it into such a network that you can use directly the waste. And yeah, and again, like a few wastewater treatment plants that I could go and visit, where it shows the kind of screening happening, then the entire primary process and the final water that is being put up. Talking in terms of the local entrepreneurship, it was a kind of an important study for me to understand how have these local entrepreneurs brought into the prosperity of the city. So I kind of covered two different categories. One was Mr. Trevor Muladzi, that I could cover in Johannesburg, where he had done a lot of intense work with the school children out there. And the second one was in terms of India, where I could study Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak's entire work, which was based on the eradication of manual scavenging and provision of like low-cost sanitation technology. So what used to happen in India is since the sewer system wasn't accessible to all, there were these bucket systems that were being practiced, and due to the use of bucket system, this gave rise to manual scavenging. So also what was prevalent in India was the existing caste system. So the people from, as in mainly the women from the lower caste, they were forced to do such kind of manual scavenging. So what Dr. Bindeshwar Pathak did was, he changed the entire system by changing the kind of toilets that were provided. So instead of bucket system, he kind of provided the toilets which were like which used water. So, and these are like he kind of tried to put in like low cost sanitation technology by using the material that is like on-site material. So he had provided all different kinds of toilets, and because of this, what happened is the bucket system stopped. But even then, in order to generate some sort of an economy, the women didn't have such opportunities. So what he did is he kind of got them into these rehabilitation centers, where he kind of gave them work so that they shouldn't get back to the demeaning practice of manual scavenging. Yeah. In terms of Johannesburg, when I was studying the works done by Mr. Trevor Muladzi, it is kind of shocking for me, because what he showed was what kind of, if you provide a good public toilet, how is it going to affect the entire prosperity of the country. So this is the school that I could go, and this is the work that Trevor Muladzi has done. So if you see, these were the existing situations out there. This was a school next to it, where these are the kinds of toilets that they had. So if you see, the doors weren't locked, as in there were no doors. In fact, the cisterns didn't work. There was like literal abuse on the walls. The urinals didn't work out, clogged up basins and things like that. So as a result of this, what happened is the students out there, they couldn't, for example, if someone needs to go for the toilet and use the toilet, he couldn't concentrate on what exactly is the teacher's teaching. So what Trevor did is he kind of provided only good kind of toilets, and then after that he took a survey showing that how does these toilets help students to understand, as in how to increase on their concentration in the schools. So that was kind of interesting for me to understand out there, because the survey clearly states that when they had like these kind of toilets, a lot of students, what happened is this was a toilet which was surrounded by a few restaurants and bars and things like that. And since the students couldn't use these toilets, what they started doing is they started using the toilets that were present in the restaurants and the bars. As a result of this, they started smoking as well as the consumption of alcohol. So this is how the entire system was working out there. So after providing only clean toilets, what Trevor tried to do is he tried to just put up a small line in which the toilets need to be clean, and also he started educating the students how do you use it. So this is how he had taken an initiative to make a small effect, as in to make a butterfly effect. The next thing, it talks about finance, maintenance and capacity building, where I kind of was kind of understanding how does the entire capacity building in terms of sanitation works out. So I taken an example of again Beijing. Oops, I'm so sorry. So what happens is I was kind of studying the initiative again taken by the government out there to understand and put up a capacity building such that it should provide the sanitation to such a huge mass that was coming for the Beijing Olympics, and also a few considerations that the government had done. And then the next one was to understand the Sanisets in Paris. As in Sanisets, these were the initial toilets which were then replaced by Sanisets. It was done so because these toilets were based on the sewers, and it needed a lot of water. But as the city developed, water became an issue out there. So what the government has done is they've kind of provided good type of toilet in which they use less water and things like that. So these were the Sanisets in Paris. Talking about in terms of sustainability and sanitation, what my major key assumption is that you can only term an entire sanitation system sustainable if it relates to the context. If it what generally happens is it is so observed that if in case a system works well somewhere, for example, if the system works well in the Olympic Forest Park, you kind of try to put up the same system in terms of Mumbai. But as you see, there are like smaller aspects of sanitation. For I'll just give you an example of what the person out there in Beijing told me. He was asking me if I was clicking photographs of the food that I eat. So at that time I thought he's just kidding. So I said yes, I am clicking because I like to try different types of cuisine. He told me you need to put that in the presentation, because based on the food that you eat is the entire system based. So is the entire system laid down, sorry. So for example, if you want to lay down a system in Beijing, it has to cater to the population. It has to cater to the population of Beijing, which has an intake of like simpler substances. So the entire system changed as per the food intake also. So this was a kind of study that I could do in terms of sustainability and sanitation. So yeah, this is an example that see, these are the UDDTs that were provided in a school, and the same thing were replicated in terms of the primary schools in India, but it entirely failed because the kind of mindset that people do have, it is important to change that mindset in order to make a system sustainable. Yeah, see, if you see, these were the kind of toilets these are the kind of things that were introduced in terms of the concept of courtyards, but at the same, it totally failed when it came across in the slums. So getting to the conclusion, the above case studies and for that, in order to attain a sustainable sanitation at an urban level, the following practices must be ensured, where the first one talks about sanitation has been accorded lower priority, and there is poor awareness about its inherent linkage with the public health. Generating awareness is crucial in order to change the public mindset. So it is important for us to make people understand what exactly sanitation is. So it is important for us to change these public mindsets. So the second one talks about sanitation investments are currently planned in a piecemeal manner and do not take into account the cycle of safe confinement, treatment and safe disposal. Understanding the entire chain from the micro level amenities like provision of toilets to the macro level amenities like the wastewater treatment plant is imperative. Advanced technology isn't always cost effective. An appropriate system should be considered after thorough deliberation of these contexts. Sanitation has been provided by the public agencies in supply-driven manner, with little regard to the demands and the preferences of the households as customers. It is essential to have the client and demand generation focus on it. So this is how it is important to understand what the community is and to get to get the community inside the system in order for the system to sustain. Thus, sanitation is an evolving process, changing with culture, economy, social habits, and resources. Yet, it should always aim to make sure that the system is running and evolving along with its context and not crumble if not constantly updated in terms of the short terms. And in terms of a long-term run, it should focus on increasing the standards worldwide and constantly setting higher benchmarks. And yes, a lot of people who helped me across the entire study. So thank you. This was my presentation.